All right, folks, buckle up. We have a fantastic show today, and this one's going to be a little bit wild. I already know because Jeg is a very different individual in a good way. So, Jeg, first of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, listen, I met you in a garage or something like that
Yeah.
on a driveway, working out. Anytime Chet Scott brings somebody into the workout, it's going to be an adventure, and that's how I reconnected with Tom Ryan and a bunch of amazing people. But Jeg, why don't you tell us? And I've been watching you for a while. In my opinion, here's why I like you, and then maybe you tell us the story. How's that? I'll tell you
Cool.
why. I'll tell
Yeah.
you why I like you.
I could listen to that.
All right, I'll tell you why I like you. So, number one, what really got my attention is you're humble. And folks, what I mean by that is Jeg's walking one day after a workout, and he's like, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. And again, I've had a podcast for, I don't even know, man, like longer than you've been alive. Like I had hair when I started or something. But you're kind of like, yeah, I think I'm going to start a podcast. And then you said something. Well, I think I'm going to get Jack to do the first
Nicholas.
interview.
Yeah. Yeah. Jack Nicholas.
I think I'm going to get Jack Nicholas to do the first interview. And I'm thinking, okay, I don't golf, but I've heard of Jack Nicholas. How popular is Jack Nicholas?
Well, I mean, for really all of what I would say is the original golf modern era. Jack was the face of the game. He, Arnold Palmer, and Gary Player were the big three, and Jack Nicklaus broke every record in sight, which his record for 18 majors still stands today as the most majors for any one golfer. He was from Columbus, Ohio, here a Buckeye himself, played for the Ohio State University, and he's been a lifelong steward of the game. So
Wow.
in terms of golf, I mean, if between he and Tiger is kind of the two goats per se.
Yeah.
And everybody has a different subjective viewpoint on that, but Jack, in terms of not only his golf, but probably more importantly his character off the golf course and his philanthropic work, the
Okay.
family is built. He's a statesman through and through.
So Jake's like, yeah, I think I'm going to interview him. And I'm thinking, what in the heck? What's he talking about? And then I think you posted the link, and then I look at your back episodes, and I'm like, what the heck? Dude's got Lance Armstrong, right? You got
Yeah.
Lance. So then you go to interview Lance Armstrong, and you might know this, you might not, but I've gotten into cycling in my later years, and I've been to
Yeah.
France. I've been to France the last 2 summers. I'm going back again. And so I've kind of got into cycling. And so I'm not like a follower of Lance or Jack, but I'm like, okay, that's a caliber guy. And then I look at your other episode, and it's Aaron Rodgers, and I'm from Wisconsin, where like Green Bay, and I'm thinking, okay, what the heck, dude? How are you getting these guests and then being humble? And then I don't know, tell us more about Lance, Aaron, and then the last thing is you just traveling all over the world. And I'm thinking like, okay, is this dude selling drugs or what's he doing? And you had a massive exit I'd love for you to talk about. And then the last thing I'd love for you to talk about is your hunger for God and spirituality.
Yeah.
So just take us in, man, because I wanted the people to like realize a little bit of the lens of where, of you.
Well, I appreciate that. The podcast has been a pretty unique journey. I mean, my partner in the project, Morgan Hoffman is his name. I was a fellow golfer, and we started what's called the I Can Fly podcast. Our first episode launched just over a year ago.
Mm.
It was first week of January last year, and Morgan has an incredible story. He was a PGA Tour player for several years, I think 6-7 years on the PGA Tour. Came out of Oklahoma State as the #1 amateur in the world. Went straight to the PGA Tour. And amidst his journey on the tour, he started to recognized this loss of muscle in his pec. And for years, he would have tests done and couldn't come to any conclusion whatsoever after getting tests done, spending over $500,000 of his own money within different hospital networks to try to get an answer. And years later was finally clinically diagnosed with muscular dystrophy.
Wow.
Which of course is a disease that's essentially a sentence. There's no cure at this point in Western medicine. And at the time, he was a top 50 ranked golfer in the world, looked more like a surfer than a golfer, extremely fit person. And he kept playing on tour for another year or two, started a foundation that was based around dystrophy research, but then eventually left the tour and really left the Western world. Morgan went and lived in Nepal for a long period of time, was being treated by this ancient Eastern medicine practitioner on this mountainside in Nepal where he's being prayed on every day and using all these ancient herbs and techniques. And then he had an incredible kind of journey and experience with ayahuasca and different psychedelics that ultimately has led to a turnaround in his journey with dystrophy, to where he's actually shown signs of muscle growth in his pec and thigh and a couple different areas where he'd lost muscle. And so he's just an incredibly inspirational story, and he's defying what science says is possible. But Morgan has been a dear friend of mine. We got to know each other well years ago playing golf out of the same home course together in Jupiter, Florida. And we were sitting down. It's interesting. I'll draw the parallel to faith here, actually. So Morgan has an aura about him that when you are in the room with him, and I'll never forget, I had a very singular moment with him. I didn't see him for 4 or 5 years because he was off on this journey.
Wow.
And he had a charity golf tournament he invited me to come to at a course in Georgia. And we came under a little rain delay, and he was in the group in front of me. And when there was a little hut in the distance, we all kind of ran over there and, stood under this little, roof for a minute. And I had this conversation with him for 5-6 minutes where I couldn't tell you what the subject matter was, but it was his presence in this conversation where it was literally like his eyes were seeing through me. I mean, he was just so right there.
Wow.
And I said to my best friend Jake with me at the time when we walked away after the rain had subsided, and I said, man, I don't know what that dude's on, but I just want to be around him more, because he just had a presence with him that now, as I look back on that moment, 2 years removed, he had a presence about him that was somebody that had an encounter with his own mortality. And I don't know, I connect that to faith in some capacity, because in getting to know Christ, there's this rebirth of who you are. And it's a different one. His journey hasn't been that necessarily, but he's certainly had a rebirth of his own spirit inside of him that's shown him an ability to heal himself in some capacity. And, when I ask him about questions around that, it's, that is ultimately what it is. He's believed that he has turned this diagnosis around in his body. And so it's really just an inspiring story. And we decided to start I Can Fly together as two passionate students of life that through his network and through some of mine, we're blessed to get to know a lot of really interesting and powerful, impactful people in the world. And our first year of I Can Fly had some pretty wild guests, like you said, from Jack Nicklaus to Rory McIlroy to Aaron Rodgers, Lance Armstrong. I mean, it's just, and then of course Chet Scott, our most famous guest. And so it's been a treat, and it's been a real humble and honor to get to sit down and ask these incredible leaders questions about their life, and specifically the hard times in their life. And we see, I think someone asked me early on when we actually first launched the podcast, and the Jack Nicklaus episode was live. I was playing golf the next day with a young kid, and he listened to it already, and he asked me, he's like, hey, what do you hope people take away from these episodes? I was like, that's an interesting question. I hadn't thought about that necessarily. So like a couple holes later, I come to him and I go, you know what I think it is? My hope is that through these conversations that we have, which are long form, eye-to-eye contact, eye-to-eye conversations, people see that these folks that we very rightly so put on pedestals for their successes
Mm,
are humans just like you and me.
yeah.
And they go through the same emotional struggles, the same battles of existential thoughts, and you name it, as any of us do. And I think to have a conversation that's based in humanity and just connection
Mm,
has been really, really meaningful to us, and it's been a lot of fun.
wow. Well, I know we could go a lot of places in our topic, but I'm gonna hit one up. Let me know
Cool.
what you think. I grew up as a Christian, you know, in a Christian home. My dad was a pastor, so you know, I went through my own journey of depression, self-injury, so much so that I became a pastor. I would preach on Sunday and self-injure on Monday. It was like
Mm,
it was a big civil war, man, you know? And God healed me through that, a lot of long story. But what I'm seeing now is I'm seeing a lot of this whole young generation go one of two ways. I'm seeing this massive hunger for Christ within college football athletes right now, just because it's
sure.
popular, and
Yep.
NFL, like I've never seen before. I mean, I'm
Yep.
talking people have been putting montages on, and I'm probably on some algorithm, but I'm getting like all the time. I want to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I mean, and these people are even the other day, the Ohio State guy. I'm not all on the names, but I think the one guy, Henderson, something like that.
Yeah. Travion Henderson.
Yeah,
Yeah. Running back.
I think he had gotten up and he had punched a guy,
Yeah.
and then he got a 15-yard penalty, and then right before halftime, he caught a pass, ran it back, changed the momentum of the game, and they interviewed him after, and he said, "Look, I messed up, and I was down on myself, and I shouldn't have done that. I didn't want to be that person." And someone came up to me and told me, "Think about Christ," and I started thinking about Christ, and I said, "Meet me in this game, Jesus," and the next play, I run it back for a touchdown. Like, you got that. And then you got this other group that I'm going to talk about called the deconstructionists. And I don't know if you've heard
Mm,
that term. Have you heard that
mm-mm.
term?
No.
It's these people who've been brought up in the church. And listen, I know I'm making a big old accusation here, but I'm going to call out this movement. You can't heal if the church has wounded you if you don't name the person. Somebody told
Mm.
me that once. You can see what I'm saying? People
I
who are
think what do you I want to make sure I understand. When you say when you can't heal if the church has done it and you don't name the person, what do you mean that name the person?
there's this whole movement right now where you got your on-fired people that I would say didn't grow up in the church or didn't grow up with
Yeah,
faith, and they are like, and I would call you as part of that. And
I am.
I want to
Yeah,
hear
very
about
much
that.
so.
I want to hear about that in a
Yeah,
moment. Then you
yeah,
got your, I know I'll be quoted in this here, but I'm just going to call it out. You got your stuck up, stubborn people, like
yeah,
your privileged people who grew up with, let's just call it a spiritual wealth.
yeah,
They grew up spiritually wealthy, kind of like what we talk about today's generation, how if you grew up with a lot of physical wealth, you're not grateful. I'm making
sure.
stereotypes all over the place, but
I
you get the
understand.
point. And I think there's this poverty people, I'll call it you and Trayvon, who are hungry, who didn't grow up with a faith. And then you got your spiritually wealthy people who are ticked off at the church. The church did me wrong. Christians did me wrong. I'm mad at God. I'm deconstructing my faith. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I mean, so to me like what you're describing is exactly what kept me from ever opening a Bible, really.
Really?
I mean, yeah, I grew up. I'd be short-sighted to sit here and say like I didn't have a spiritual family or something.
Mm,
My family's believed in God. I grew up in a Catholic church. I was baptized as a kid, and I I was very blessed to, especially with my mom and my dad, both together. But my mom really always encouraged me to have a personal relationship with God, a friendship with God,
wow.
and she always raised me to pray every night, in a personal manner, even pray in some capacity. I actually started doing this on my own. I don't know what age, probably 9. I think I lost my first grandfather, and I started praying to him too.
Wow.
In my prayer to God, I would pray to my grandfather too. And then I would add people to that as they passed on in my young life, and I would stay connected to them in some capacity. But I never, but I always enjoyed going to church. I liked the environment, but I never connected with the word. Oftentimes because it wasn't construed or displayed in a way that was that digestible. So I think as I think about what you just said, what's really interesting about it is this generation is without question having a very real spiritual awakening. I felt it in my own, and I don't want to overly project that over the colloquial world.
But I've seen it too. Yeah.
But I've seen it amongst my peer set. I see it a lot on social media and amongst a lot of folks, and I think it is because there's an openness and a willingness to think beyond kind of the realms of how things have always been done. I mean, we've had if you just look at really, anyone under the age of 30 and what their trust is in large organizations, it's little to none, whether it's government or it's large corporations or it's healthcare. So by nature, this generation is being bred, for better or worse, in a way that is, I want to get to direct truth. I want to get to my own source of truth, right? And discover that on my own. So as I think about that in a spiritual context, the only way and the best way to do that in a Christian life is to go to the Word, and to go directly to the Word of God and read the Bible, have your own experience with the Bible that's met not only through the reading of the Word, but also through your own spiritual experience with it. It's like, I feel like some of my experience with the church growing up was more very robotical, and you show up and say the same things at the same times, and you're not really thought to think anything outside the box of that, right? Then I go on this journey in my own life of kind of looking for deeper meaning in my life. You made mention to it earlier. I've been so blessed in my life. I mean, I've grown up in a family where my grandfather founded an automotive parts company here in Columbus, Ohio in 1960 called Jegs Automotive. My father and his brothers grew up in that business, ultimately building it to be a worldwide e-commerce business throughout the 2000s. And I was very blessed to grow up in that world, work in the business growing up. And as a result of that, grow up in a household that by every capacity it was materially blessed in abundance. And as a result of that, we, to what you mentioned earlier, sold the company at the end of 2021, which I can shorten in some capacity, but it's a long story.
Right in COVID?
Yeah, right at the tail. I mean, it was in the heart of COVID, but we sold the company in December of 2021. And so about a year later, I was really starting to have these wrestling thoughts of, there's got to be more to just this life than, what's next, and then more and more things. I went on a lot of, trips. To your point, I spent a lot of time in Costa Rica with Morgan, who I started the podcast with. Had some experiences with psychedelics and plant medicine ceremonies that, for me, really expanded my mind beyond these bounds of kind of how our world is built. I mean, I was really able to kind of see past the realm of reality in some capacity and have this connection with a higher power that I didn't know how to name, but you have this connection with a higher spirit. And so it's made me such a spiritual person, having this encounter with nature through plant medicine. And I've used that in my own now dive into faith for truth. Because that's what I've been searching for, is real truth behind where do we go? Where do we come from?
Yeah. But a lot of people though would do the plant medicine. Because I watched Aaron Rodgers' Netflix. Actually, I have a close relative who I think she's done 20 some ayahuasca, ceremonies and stuff.
Yeah.
She's not, this person in particular is not going to Christ. I mean, I think it's rare. I could be wrong. Maybe I'm ignorant, but I think it's odd that you went that path and then got closer to Christ. I mean, do you think that's pretty odd? Because it's almost like ayahuasca. I talk to people and they're like, it opens me up to everything and anything. And then you then go to Christ and the Word, which is almost by its nature limiting, which I think Christ is. I am the way, the truth, and the life. So how do those two fit together?
Yeah. It's a big question. It's a huge question. One obviously I'm in the midst of wrestling with, because I frankly generally feel supportive to plant medicine because of my own experience with them. I don't think it's for everybody. I think it's very much something you should learn about, and I wouldn't send anybody to go have a plant ceremony, but I do believe that these plants were put on Earth. They're these weren't something that were created by man. This was a plant that was put on Earth for some reason, and if used in the right setting, with the right people, in the right ceremony space, held in the right regard, I believe they can be unbelievably power tools to access the transcendent. Now, like, I'll share with you an experience that was really meaningful to me in my first ever plant medicine ceremony. The shaman that day, my name is Iran, and we were like 16 hours into a ceremony at this point, and towards the tail end, it's late, and he says, my hope and prayer is that I never see any of you again. And first off, I thought to myself, well, that's not a good salesman. For somebody that's in the plant medicine business, he's not doing a good job of selling his product here. But what he was saying is that what you've experienced today, the love and the connection to the universe and the oneness we felt together, is only worth anything if you can take that learning and apply it to your life in total sobriety when you're home. Because that's the challenge. Anybody can do this when we're high on a plant medicine of some sort. But how can you do that in a way that applies to your daily and regular life? So that was my calling. That was my journey. I took that and said, how can I feel this unbelievable oneness and this connection to the world and nature, and how can I feel that regularly? Because gosh, it's amazing, And my first time ever experiencing something where I feel like I can do it in a place of total, sobriety, like I said, is through the Word and through prayer.
That's crazy.
I can have that same access point where but here's what I'm trying to say. If I hadn't experienced the spiritual experience of the plant medicine that kind of allowed me to see above this plane of three-dimensional reality that we live in, allowed me to connect to these higher spirits that are clearly above this world, regardless of what you think, I don't know if I would have had the same spiritual connection in my prayer and in the Word. So I think they serve a purpose. And again, I don't.
No, I think
there was
I
a
think
great
I think
line
it's fascinating.
There's a great line from Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan had a great episode where they talked a lot about psychedelics, and Jordan used it in a lot of his biblical context. And he said something along the lines, I'm going to butcher it, but something along the lines of like, the access to the transcendent and the social responsibility that you suddenly feel by having that experience is only worth anything, like Iran said, if you apply it to your regular life. Otherwise, you've just accessed this new vantage point and just go further into hedonistic tendencies. If you don't bring that back into your regular life. So that's the challenge. It's plant medicine's a vehicle. It's an access point, but it's just a side door, and you have to keep going afterwards.
Here's a question, because obviously I'm curious about this. I had a different family member who, got way down the path of heroin and, almost death. And, so it freaked me out as a young kid. Wow, like if that could do that damage, drug use, and I know plant medicine is not the same as heroin, but what I'm
Sure.
saying is, as a believer, as a follower of Christ, what if you are right that it does open you up to a spiritual world? Can that be a danger too? Meaning, we both know biblically there are other spirits out there. Like, where does that land? Have you ever seen ayahuasca or others open
Yeah.
themselves up and it go really bad because of the spiritual realm?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's why I say this all with a very real,
Yeah.
aspect of, I'm not here to advertise or push the usage of plant medicine by any means. I believe that it's something that if you do your own research on and you feel called to the medicine in some capacity, you can have an unbelievable experience there. But to be very clear, how ancient cultures have used these medicines, they've not been abused.
Mm,
They've not been pulled around to and passed on for generations to be used in any kind of regular capacity. These medicines and plants were used with sacred nature to them in prayer to have a singular experience with them that would allow you to access the transcendence to bring back into your regular life. Any abuse of them is total negligence to what the power of the medicine is. So it's a very different, and that's why I think there is a lot of usage of plant medicine when it comes to PTSD,
sure.
or you have unbelievable occurrences with folks that do have addictions of some sort, because especially when it comes to psychedelics, whether it's psilocybin or
I was it
different.
Ibogaine or something? Yeah.
Yeah, you're actually accessing parts of your brain that you've never accessed before, and using these new neural pathways to rewire your thinking. And so,
Mm,
of course, there's also danger to this,
mm,
meaning, and I think this is a very challenging subject matter, and
yeah.
one that if anyone is curious about exploring, like, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of people that are in the space, um,
It
and
seems to
and
be
you
on
should
its
be careful.
upswing. Yeah. Yeah.
It is, because in the
Yes.
same breath that we said earlier that people are looking for the spiritual world, people are looking in different places for it. My
Yeah.
encouragement, um, and I'm just being, I reserve the right to change my opinion on this over time, but like, I part of my struggle, to your point about kind of the two worlds you're seeing among
Yeah.
spirituality and
Yeah.
youth right now are, I don't want to ever enter into that bucket that is so strongly held in their self-righteousness in some capacity, in their own, the way I think is right and the way these people do it is wrong, that I'm not open to, how other people think or how other people make sense of the world. um, but I do believe in my own experience that getting to know God through a great church, or
Mm,
ultimately, I think the best place is in the Word, and then
yeah.
in the quiet of your own heart to pray. Um,
Well, you're a deep thinker too, though, like, journaling and writing.
yeah,
I mean, that talk about that, because, a lot of people who watch this are authors, writers, I'm one myself. And how have you found relief, comfort, encouragement, adding journal, meditation, all those things?
yeah. I My best friend Jake got me into writing, um, 4 years ago, like regularly, 4 or 5 years ago. I would write occasionally here and there, but he really pushed me because of his own analysis of me, like you just said, of being a deep thinker. He's like, if anybody should be a journaler, it's you. I think you'd really enjoy it. And
Yeah.
so he got me my first journal, just like this one.
Sweet.
And I think I think have 20 of these things filled at this point.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I write in really um, two fashions. One is, something happened today that I don't want to forget. Either it was funny, or my friend said something, or this thing happened, and it's a way to hold on to a memory that I inevitably will lose with time,
Mm.
but if I just take the 5 minutes and write it, it lives on, you know? So that's one. And two is free writing. It's just true trying to get the absolute chaos that is this mind organized on paper. And
Interesting.
it inevitably does in some way. It's a very therapeutic experience. And in my walk with God, my journaling has really become a lot of prayer. I write prayers.
Wow.
I write journal entries that are, dear God, thank you
And
for.
didn't I hear in one of your podcasts maybe that you actually wrote to your future either wife or kid?
Yeah, it's interesting you ask that. I write to my kids a good bit, and I don't have children, to be clear. But I write to my future kids one day, and
I'm
I'm
just saying,
gonna.
like, how old are you, man?
Yeah, I'm 27.
27.
I've been doing that for 3 or 4 years now.
I'm just telling you. This is why I wanted to interview Jag, because who is just it's a wild story, man. It's wild. And I knew we'd go in places where who knows it would go. But so you're writing your future kids.
Yeah.
Why?
So a couple things, and I'm going to tell you, this really just formed to me the other day, and I'm actually in.
Yeah,
I'm going to read to
Go for
you a entry the other day, and just this little clip of it that I've been really fascinated with the concepts of time recently, and how I believe that love transcends time, and that love is this higher dimension that connects us to my grandfather, who passed away when I was 8 years old, but I can still feel his presence in my heart. How's
Mm.
that? I think it's through love and how it transcends time. So I was writing this entry to my kids the other day. And ultimately, I do it because I want to give all these journals to my kids one day and be like, hey, here was me trying to figure out my 20s, and just have at it. But every now and then I write, and it's just me, right? It's my own journal entries, but every now and then I'll write kids, and it's an entry specifically to them.
Wow.
And so the other night I was writing and I said,
Mm.
find something to look forward to and hold on to it with all of you. You are that for me. I haven't even met or conceived you yet, but I feel you. This is the oneness of God. Love transcends and stretches beyond time. And in a wild way, just like I am writing to you now, and you are not physically here, yet I can feel you. One day I will not be around, and you will be, and you will still feel me. Love transcends time and space.
Wow.
And that was just this wild concept that kind of
Yeah.
came, and it's like, that I'm writing them, and like literally I can like feel them with such confidence that like they're gonna happen in my life. So one thing I've always known I wanted to be was a father in my life, and it's like, but they're not here, but I can feel like they're here, and then one day
You'll be
I won't be
together.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then
What?
ultimately
Yeah.
one day I won't be here and they will be, but they'll
Right.
still be able to feel me. So
It's
it's
crazy.
like, yeah, it's just this wild spiritual higher dimension, I think.
That is a very interesting thought, that time. No, it's I've gone down a path in my life thinking that when I imagine something, put it this way, everything you see right now in your office
Yeah.
has been created twice. So the thing behind you was first created in the person's mind,
Mm,
and then it had to be created physically. And so
mm,
therefore, check this out, Jake. You go through in life first creation and second creation. So
mm,
what you just talked about with your kids is a first creation. And just like an inventor thought of Smoothie King, we should open a Smoothie King and it will look like this, and here's a logo. It exists in two planes.
mm.
One in you know, imagination. And so check this out. Do you know what the word abracadabra means?
No,
Have you ever said
I mean,
abracadabra? Have you ever said abracadabra?
Yeah, when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's what it means. I create as I speak.
Oh, wow.
Is that crazy?
Interesting. Yeah,
And
sure.
do you know it's made up of 3 Hebrew words? You ready for this?
Mm,
Because everyone's like, oh, abracadabra probably means something magic.
sure.
But it means 3 Hebrew words. Abba in Hebrew. I don't know if you know what the word Abba means.
Mm-mm.
It means father.
Mm.
So it's made up of Father, Son, Spirit. Abracadabra. Google it later.
No way.
Yes. Is that nutty?
What?
Is that nutty?
No way.
Seriously. Abracadabra. I create as I speak. It came to pass as it was spoken. So think about Jesus in the New Testament. And the guy comes up to him and says, my servant's sick. And Jesus says, I'll go heal him. And he says, you don't even have to go. Just say the word and he'll be healed.
Yeah.
And then he goes back. And at that point, he was healed. Is that crazy?
See, so it's insane, but that's part of like the carnal world that we live in, right? This room and this space and the cities we go into and the minds we're all trapped in, right? You can't read the Bible with that mindset and be like, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like like that's why I think
It's
that you
another
have,
dimension, is what you're saying.
yeah, and if you have the spiritual experience that's leading your reading of the Bible, it's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And you
Like
can
they say,
understand these incredible acts.
it's
You
living and
know?
active and sharper than any double-edged sword. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
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 So when Jesus says, or when God says, in the beginning, let there be light, and there was light. In the beginning, let there be light. God said. So like God speaks. And this gets really wild, dude. What's his name? The martial artist. Bruce Lee. He's got a really interesting quote.
Yeah.
He's got a really interesting quote. He says, be careful what you say about yourself because it comes true. That's why we call it spelling, as in spell.
Spells.
Like you know what I'm saying? So
of course.
it's
But what you
interesting,
say
man.
about yourself is fundamentally what you become, what
Yeah.
you think about yourself, you know?
That's right.
I mean,
That's right.
yeah. It's
So
so true.
I mean,
Words are spells. There's no question.
It's crazy. Wow. So yeah, when you look at the scriptures through these types of ways, it's like it's pretty powerful. I mean, I read this morning a verse came and it said, Paul prayed that he would be delivered from the thorn in the flesh. And God says, no, my strength is made perfect in weakness. And I'm like, my grace is sufficient. My strength, my strength is made perfect in your weakness. And I'm reading that. I'm like, dude, that is so deep. Like I think what you're saying is like, there's this level and then there's a deeper level.
And we've all felt it.
Yeah.
Meaning even if you've never had an encounter with Christ or God in necessarily a Christian context, we've all felt the oneness before.
This is why atheism to me is so jacked. Like to me, atheism is and you might have been there before. I was always angry at God. I didn't say God didn't exist. I was like, yeah, he exists and I hate him. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what you think about that.
I don't know what I think about. I've always believed in a creator. I just didn't know who, and I still don't have an exact. My own human mind can't comprehend what or who God is, and I think he's so much. Like we try to make sense of it for our own sense of certainty.
Put God in our box, yeah.
Right, but he's so much bigger than that. And why I say that we've all had these experiences of oneness is you can feel it in so many different places. It's that feeling when you're on the beach and the wind's blowing in the right direction, and you're overlooking the ocean and you're just overtaken by this feeling of lightness, or you're at a great concert
Mm,
and everybody's just on the same wavelength. Like
yeah.
that to me is the oneness that ultimately God is seeking for us people to be in, you
Mm.
know.
Versus,
I always,
yeah, keep going, keep going.
well, like, I just think that why I struggled to get into the Bible, or why not struggle, but I just never looked there, was I thought that it was just this really black and white world that you either fit into or you didn't. And if you
Mm,
didn't, then you were shamed, and you were bad and you were wrong. And as I've read the Gospels and gotten to know Jesus through the Word and experienced him in my heart, I'm like, man, this dude just walked in the ultimate love for people, and who he really judged most harshly were the
Pharisees.
Pharisees,
Yeah,
you know. And I think we live in a very Pharisaic world,
yeah,
that says they're one thing and walk very differently. It's a
yeah.
battle every day, and but Christ, his walk was just with ultimate love and grace to everyone he crossed, you
It's
know.
pretty wild, man. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the aim, you
Wow.
know?
So as
That's the
we,
Christian walk to me.
it's
That's the
crazy.
way. That's living in the way. It's to love God, and
Mm.
to give an abundance of love and kindness to every person you cross, you know? It's the carnal mind that wants to divide and be in the in crowd or the out crowd, but I don't know, the way I'm getting to know Christ is like he was a very loving person, you know?
So you're 27.
Yeah,
You kind of got a lot of freedom. You
yeah.
tried your swing at golf and you did very well. Almost this return to golf. What does what we're having this chat in December 2025 and you're like, "Man, it was a good year."
Mm.
What needs to happen for you to say, "Man, it was a good year." In
God, what
in
a
in
great
in life.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. Um, Man, I really I am most motivated in my faith right now, and I think that for me to look back at 2025 and concretely say this was a great year, I want to have really stepped into a more structured environment of learning the Bible.
Mm,
I've
wow.
not read it in its entirety yet, and I
That's
really want
wild,
to.
man. That's wild.
Yeah, yeah, and I really want to. Like nowhere near. I've read probably like a fifth of it. I've
Wow.
read almost the entire New Testament and like barely any Old Testament. I mean, I've read Exodus and Genesis. So,
That's
uh,
exciting, dude. That's crazy, man. I gotta tell you, at the age of 27, I had my bachelor's, master's, and doctorate in the Bible. And like, I'm
wow.
not saying that to say anything. I'm saying like there's some things you said today about the Bible that I'm like, dang, I didn't even know that at 27 with all those degrees about. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, I
Yeah,
can tell you've been
I
walking
appreciate
with
that.
Christ in a lot of these ways. Okay, so that's one thing, structured Bible. What else?
Yeah, I think what's interesting about the questions, like, you know, I'm definitely in a season of life right now where I don't have it figured out as to what I want to do next. I don't have it in a box right now as to like what my title is or what exactly I'm doing. I've started a private investment practice. I invest in startups. I invest in a multitude of different asset classes, and I also have a media production company that I've started with a friend where we've got a podcast and a movie that we've invested in and different things. We've got a lot of different things going on that are all based in the same passion for just life that I have.
Mm,
But I'm really looking for that next thing to like sink my 100% focus into, because that's when I've ultimately always been the most fulfilled, is when I'm the most committed to something. And I don't have an answer for exactly what that's going to be yet, but the answer I do have right now, and it's brought me more peace to feel this, is I don't know exactly where I'm going, but for the first time, I do know who I'm following.
Ooh, that's mic drop. Okay,
Yeah.
hold on. I
And
don't know where I'm going, but for the first time in my life, I know who I'm following.
yeah, yeah. And it's like it's a battle because it's like some days, man, it's so just on fire and
Yeah.
I'm just glistening and I'm in the word in the morning and I'm praying throughout the day and I feel like I'm going and then I'll have days where I'm just down,
Mm.
and I'm a very emotional person and and I get down on not having enough to do and not having my life figured out in this professional way that's, listen, it's not like in America, you meet somebody new and they ask you two questions. Where are you from? What do you do? And when you don't have a concrete answer for those, it's a challenge, and because that's what we value in this Western world more than
Mm,
anything is what do you do? And so, that's I feel like I've been on a journey of kind of figuring out who I am
mm,
and what I stand for, and what's
mm.
what's come in that journey is like really starting to believe like, well, who am I following? You know, and
That's good, man. That's good.
yeah,
Well, maybe the last five
I'm gonna
minutes.
think about that some more
You
though.
think about
Like,
that?
yeah, well, what's like, because I mean, I have goals.
Yeah.
Golf is still something I'm very much active in. I want to compete in golf. I got a goal to win the U.S. Mid Amateur. I want to win the Ohio Mid Amateur. Like, I mean, there's goals for me in golf that I'll look back on, but those are just like passion things and keep me going. But I it's a good way to think back on it. But I'm confident that uh, the biggest thing I want to look back on at the year and say that I really got in a structured practice with the Bible and my faith.
Mm. So I modified the question. I actually get it from my coach, Dan Sullivan. Some of the people you run with, Brett Kaufman, Chad Silverstein, all these dudes that you might have heard Chad talk about, but they used to go to Strategic Coach. And Dan Sullivan is 80. He has this question. It's a famous question that he's coined,
Mm,
but I modified it. I shortened it, but it's, Jeg, if you and I were having a conversation 3 years from today, what would need to happen in your life personally and professionally for you to feel satisfied? And
mm,
that's his question. And then he just shuts up.
I love that. It's a
And
great question.
that question has several possibilities. One of the possibilities is that the person doesn't trust you with the answer, which then relationally is a closed door. And in the professional world, it wouldn't make sense to work with that person.
Mm,
Like that's one of the outcomes. If I say, well, I don't know, or we just met. I don't really feel comfortable telling you. Like that's a closed door.
mm,
You see what I'm saying? But the way
sure.
it's phrased, I could learn a lot about you in the next lifetime by you saying, well, in 3 years, wow, what would need to happen? And then you might start naming things off. So
Yeah, it's a great question. It's an open, yeah. Yeah, you can only be I mean, friendships and relationships can only grow as two people are willing to vulnerably share in them,
that's right.
you know? Um, are you asking me the question?
Well, I think I got some. Put it this way: in three
Yeah.
years, you see yourself with the right woman.
Hmm. Yeah,
Sweet.
that's definitely goal number one. If I could, uh, you know, be in my long-term relationship by then with my wife, or at least on the way. If that's in God's plans, I would love that. If it's not, then I'm going to keep looking. So, but
There's
I would love that.
a famous Christian. This is kind of like an insider Christian tip about how to find the right woman. You ever
Mm,
hear this one?
mm-mm,
It's basically what you're doing, but the tip is run as fast as you can to following Jesus with all your strength and all your might, and then turn to your left and see who's running with you.
mm-mm. Wow.
That's That's the old church advice that they would say.
It's a good one. That's a great line.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Well,
beautiful.
well, listen, where can people find out more about you? I mean, obviously the I Can Fly podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, I Can Fly podcast is you can find us on social. We've got our own YouTube channel. We stream on all platforms, Spotify, Apple, etc. My own personal socials at Jeg Coughlin III. I'd love to get to know anybody that listen to this there, and keep going on this journey of life.
Well, I envy something about you because at the age of 24, 25, 26, 27, I had my life completely figured out. I was the opposite of you. And I'm not saying, oh, I knew it and I could have predicted that I'd be here, but I've always been like overly ambitious, and that has its drawbacks as well. So I knew
Sure.
today would be a fun chat, and we get into some good topics.
Yeah, thank you. And it's fun for me to get to step into your world and what you've started here and see how you go about it. And I'm very grateful to get to share in the experience and be with you.
Awesome.
Truthfully.
Well, folks, check out Jeg, follow his stuff. It will stretch you. And I'm just really encouraged that somebody at 27 is so hungry for the word and hasn't even finished the whole Bible yet. To me, that's like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. It really is. So, thanks, Jeg. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, BJ. All right.
See
See ya.